You're just the janitor's mom. Right. Why are you even here? The words sliced through the air like a knife, sharp and cold, echoing across the packed auditorium at Stanford University. Hundreds of eyes turned, pinning me, Grace Thompson, to the spot where I stood, clutching my purse in a corner of the room. My simple dress, the one I'd saved up for months to buy, felt like a spotlight on my shame. This was supposed to be my son Ethan's day, his graduation from one of the best schools in the country, a moment I'd dreamed of since I raised him alone, scrubbing floors to keep him fed. But now, here I was, a speck of dust in a sea of wealth, mocked by the very people who should have celebrated with us. The auditorium glittered under chandeliers, filled with the clink of champagne glasses and the hum of proud parents in designer suits. Ethan, my boy, was out there on stage, his cap and gown crisp, his smile wide as he waited to receive his degree in computer science. I'd worked double shifts, mopped hallways at this very university, to see him here. No heat some winters, no sleep some nights. But I never let him feel the weight of it. I was proud, so proud, until I saw the place card at the family table. Right there, in mocking gold ink, beneath Mother of the Graduate. It read, Grace Thompson, Janitor Mom. No degree. My breath caught. A joke, surely. But then the laughter started, low at first, like a ripple, then louder, rolling from the table of the Harper family. Ethan's girlfriend's parents, Charles Harper, a real estate tycoon with a smirk as polished as his cufflinks, leaned back, chuckling. His wife, Evelyn, dabbed her eyes, giggling behind a manicured hand. Their daughter, Sophia, Ethan's girlfriend, didn't laugh, but her tight smile said enough. She didn't stop them. A cousin whispered something, pointing at me, and the table erupted again. Heat crept up my neck, burning my cheeks. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the polished floor I'd cleaned 1,000 times. I looked for Ethan, praying he hadn't heard, hadn't seen. He was still on stage, shaking hands with the dean, oblivious, or so I thought. I turned the card over, hands shaking, and tried to sit, but the whispers followed. What's she doing at a place like this? One of them hissed. Bet she can't even read the program. My stomach twisted, a knot of shame and anger. I'd sacrificed everything for Ethan, every late night shift, every missed meal, every dream I buried so he could have his. And now this, I stood, my purse clutched tight, ready to slip out, to spare myself the stares. But then a hand, firm and warm, grabbed mine. Ethan. His eyes weren't smiling anymore. They burned, steady, fierce. Mom, he said, his voice low but clear. We're leaving. This isn't our place. The room seemed to freeze. The chatter stopped. The Harpers' laughter died. Ethan looked at them, his gaze cutting through the crowd. You've just made a mistake, he said. One you'll regret for the rest of your lives. My heart pounded. What did he mean? I followed him. My boy, out into the California sun, leaving the glittering auditorium behind. And something told me this was only the beginning. The auditorium doors swung shut behind us, muffling the hum of Stanford's elite. My heart still raced, the sting of that place card. Grace Thompson, Janitor Mom, no degree burning in my mind. I gripped Ethan's hand, my calloused fingers rough against his, as we stepped into the warm California air. He didn't let go, his jaw tight, eyes fixed ahead like a man carrying a storm inside. I wanted to ask why he'd walked out, why he'd thrown away his moment, but the words caught in my throat. All I could manage was, Ethan, your graduation. He stopped, turned to me, his face a mix of pain and fire. "Mom," he said, voice steady but heavy. "They don't deserve you. Not here, not ever." We crossed the campus, past manicured lawns and ivy-covered buildings I'd cleaned for years. The laughter from the Harper family echoed in my head. Evelyn Harper's voice, sharp and smug, floated back to me. She probably can't even spell Stanford. Then her cousin, some slick-haired kid in a tailored suit, sneering. Why invite the cleaning lady to a place like this? Each word was a jab, cutting deeper than the last. I'd faced whispers before parents at Ethan's school, neighbors who pitied the single mom scrubbing floors, but this was public, deliberate, cruel. My eyes stung, but I blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. Not in front of Ethan. Not after everything I'd done to give him this day. He led me to a bench under a sprawling oak, the same spot where I'd wait for him after late classes, mopping buckets in tow. He sat, pulling me down beside him. I saw it. "Mom," he said quietly. "The card. Before you did." My breath hitched. "What?" He nodded, his eyes darkening. I was watching from the stage. I saw Charles Harper pass the pen to his nephew, grinning like it was a game. I saw Sophia, just standing there, letting it happen. My chest tightened. Sophia, the girl Ethan loved, the one I'd welcomed into our tiny apartment with open arms. She'd smiled at me, eaten my cooking, called me Ms. Grace. Had she known? Had she laughed too? I waited. Ethan continued, his voice low, almost a growl. I wanted to see how far they'd go, how low they'd sink to humiliate you, the woman who gave me everything. His words hung heavy, each one landing like a stone. I shook my head, confused. Why didn't you stop them, Ethan? Why let it go on? He leaned closer, his gaze piercing, because I needed to know who they really are. And now I do. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and handed it to me. A video played, grainy but clear. Charles Harper, chuckling, scribbling on the card. Evelyn, whispering. Trailer trash doesn't belong here. And Sophia, her voice soft but cutting. Ethan's mom is just a prop for his story. My heart sank, a cold weight in my chest. I looked at Ethan, expecting anger. But he was calm, too calm. "Mom," he said, "they think they're untouchable. They're wrong. Tomorrow. They'll learn what it means to mock the woman who raised me." His words sent a shiver through me. What was he planning? As we walked to the car, the campus fading behind us, I felt it a shift, like the ground was about to crack open. Ethan wasn't just my boy anymore. He was something more, something fierce, and I knew the Harpers had no idea what was coming. The drive back to our small Palo Alto apartment was quiet. The hum of the city outside barely piercing the weight between us. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel, his knuckles pale, his eyes locked on the road. I stared out the window, the sting of Sophia's words. Just a prop, cutting deeper with every mile. My mind churned, replaying the laughter, the gold-inked card, the Harpers' smug faces. I'd faced hard days, scrubbing floors till my hands bled. But nothing felt like this. Nothing hurt like being mocked in front of my son, on his day. We pulled up to our building, the same cramped place I'd raised him in, where we'd shared ramen dinners and patched dreams together. As I fumbled with my keys, Ethan spoke, his voice low, deliberate. "Mom, I need you to see something." He led me inside, the familiar creak of the door grounding me. We sat on our worn couch, the one we'd laughed on, cried on, planned his future on. He pulled out his phone again, his fingers swift, pulling up the video. "Watch this," he said, handing it to me. The screen flickered, showing the Harpers at their table. Charles. His tie loosened, chuckling as he passed the pen. Evelyn, smirking, whispering about trailer trash. And Sophia, her voice cool, detached. Ethan's mom is just a prop for his success story. My throat tightened, a lump I couldn't swallow. I looked at Ethan, his face unreadable. "You knew?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. "I saw them write it, Mom." I was watching from the stage, waiting to see if they'd stoop that low. They did. I shook my head, stunned. "Why didn't you say something? Ethan, why let them?" His eyes met mine, sharp with pain, but steady with purpose, because I needed to know who they really are, not just Sophia, but all of them. And now I do. He leaned back, his calm unnerving. "There's something I haven't told you." My heart skipped. "What?" He took a breath, his voice dropping. "You know, I've been working on a project, right? Nexus AI, my startup. It's not just a side gig. Last year, we built a security algorithm, something no one's cracked. A tech giant bought it for $200 million. My jaw dropped. I stared, searching his face for a hint of a joke. But there was none. "Ethan, you... what?" He smiled. "Just a flicker." I kept it quiet. Mom lived simply, stayed here, because I didn't want attention, didn't want people like the Harpers sniffing around. He paused, his eyes narrowing. "And there's more. I never signed Sophia's prenup. Charles pushed it, even offered to fund Nexus if I did. But I didn't need his money. I'd already won." My mind reeled. The Harpers thought they were pulling Ethan into their world, molding him into their trophy. They had no idea he was playing a bigger game. "And Harper Realty?" I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan's smile turned cold. "Their company's bleeding money. Bad deals. Worse management. I've been buying their silent shares for a year. Through shell companies. Right now, I own 49%. My breath caught. You own their company." He nodded. "And tomorrow, Mom, they're going to find out what happens when you mock the woman who made me who I am." His words hung in the air. A promise, a threat. I looked at my boy. No longer just my son, but a man with fire in his veins. And I knew the Harpers were about to face a reckoning they couldn't imagine. Ethan's words lingered in the dim light of our Palo Alto apartment, each one heavy, deliberate, like a chess move planned years in advance. My heart still raced from his revelation. 49% of Harper Realty, the Harpers' crumbling empire, already in his hands. I sat on our old couch, the fabric worn thin from years of late-night talks, and stared at my son. His calm was unnerving, a quiet storm brewing behind his eyes. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaky, "why go this far?" For me, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze piercing. "Mom, they didn't just insult you. They insulted everything you taught me: hard work, dignity, heart." His voice cracked on that last word. And for a moment, I saw the boy who'd clung to me during cold winters. Not the man who'd just confessed to outsmarting a dynasty. He stood, pacing the small living room, his steps measured but restless. "I've been watching them for months," he said. "Harper Realty's a house of cards, over-leveraged, sloppy deals, bleeding cash. Charles Harper thinks he's untouchable, but he's blind. I bought up their silent shares through shell companies, piece by piece, 49%. Mom, I'm one step from controlling it all." My mind spun. I'd cleaned floors to pay for his books, his tuition, never imagining he'd built something this big, this fierce. What's next? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. Ethan stopped, turned, and pulled his laptop from his bag. Tomorrow, he said, his fingers already flying across the keys. I'm sending an email to their board. I've lined up the final shares. By morning, I'll have 51%. My breath caught. He wasn't just fighting back, he was dismantling their world. He sat beside me, his voice low, intense. They thought they could humiliate you, Mom, and I'd just stand there, smiling for their photos, playing their game, but I don't play by their rules. He tapped the screen, pulling up a spreadsheet, rows of numbers, company names, transactions. I didn't understand it all, but I saw the stakes. This isn't just about revenge, he said. It's about showing them what happens when you underestimate us. You taught me to stand tall, to fight smart. This is me doing that. His words hit hard, stirring pride and fear in equal measure. I thought of the nights I'd come home, hands raw from bleach, to find him studying by a flickering lamp. Every sacrifice, every ache, had built this moment. There's more, he said, his eyes glinting. Charles Harper tried to buy into Nexus AI last year, offered me a stake in his company to sign that prenup with Sophia. I turned him down flat. I didn't need his money or his control. I blinked, stunned. You said no to him. Ethan nodded, a faint smile breaking through. I built Nexus from nothing, Mom. Because of you, your grit, your heart. That's my foundation. Tomorrow, they'll see what that's worth. He closed the laptop. The click, sharp in the quiet room. Get some rest, he said. Standing. We're going to San Francisco in the morning. They mocked the woman who raised me. By this time tomorrow, they'll wish they'd never met us. My chest tightened, a mix of awe and unease. As Ethan disappeared into his old bedroom, I sat there, the weight of his plan settling over me. The Harpers thought they'd won with their laughter, their cruel card. But my boy was about to pull the rug out from under their empire, and I wasn't sure whether to cheer or tremble. The morning sun glinted off the glass towers of San Francisco, but inside Harper Realty's headquarters, the air felt cold, heavy with tension. Ethan and I stepped out of the elevator, his navy suit sharp, his face unreadable. I wore my best dress, the one I'd bought for his graduation, but my hands shook, clutching my purse like a lifeline. The lobby buzzed with staff, their eyes darting to us, whispers trailing like smoke. We weren't supposed to be here, not the janitor mom, not the kid they thought they could mold. Ethan's stride was steady, purposeful, leading me to the boardroom on the top floor. My heart pounded. This was their territory, the Harpers' kingdom. But Ethan walked like he owned it. The boardroom doors swung open, revealing a long mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine. Charles Harper sat at the head, his face flushed, tie askew. Evelyn perched beside him, her lips pursed, eyes flicking to me with disdain. Sophia stood near the window, arms crossed, her face pale but defiant. The board members, a mix of suits and skeptical stares, filled the room. "What's the janitor doing in my boardroom?" Charles barked, his voice dripping with scorn. I flinched, but Ethan didn't. He set a thick folder on the table, the thud echoing like a gavel. "This," he said, his voice calm, cutting, "is the end of your reign." He opened the folder, sliding papers across the table. As of 9 today, I control 51% of Harper Realty. I bought the final shares last night. These documents prove it. Check with your lawyers. The room went silent, the air sucked out. Charles snatched the papers, his hands trembling, his eyes scanning the pages. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Sophia stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He didn't look at her. What I should have done the moment you let your family mock my mother. My chest tightened, pride and pain colliding. I wanted to shrink, to hide. But Ethan's hand found mine, steadying me. Charles slammed the papers down, veins bulging. "You little parasite. This is my company, my legacy." Ethan didn't flinch. "It was," he said, his voice like ice. "Now it's the legacy of the woman you called a nobody, the woman who worked double shifts, who taught me honor, grit, everything you'll never understand." The board members shifted, murmurs rippling. One leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Carter, you're saying you're the majority shareholder." Ethan nodded, effective immediately. "Charles Harper, Evelyn Harper, and Sophia Harper are fired. You'll get your severance by mail. Leave now." Gasps erupted. Charles lunged forward, his face red. "You can't do this." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I just did." He turned to the board, his voice steady. "Harper Realty will change. Starting today, we prioritize fair wages, benefits for every worker, janitors, clerks, all of them. That's the legacy of Grace Thompson, the woman you laughed at." My eyes burned, tears threatening. But I stood taller, Ethan's strength anchoring me. Charles sputtered. Evelyn clutched her pearls, and Sophia stared, her face crumbling. Ethan nodded to me, and we turned, walking out together, leaving the Harpers' empire in ruins. The boardroom doors closed behind us, the silence deafening. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the storm we'd unleashed. My boy had turned their laughter into ashes, and I'd never felt so seen. The glass doors of Harper Realty's headquarters closed behind us, sealing the stunned silence of the boardroom. Ethan and I stepped into the San Francisco sunlight, my heart still racing from the confrontation. His hand stayed firm in mine, grounding me as we walked to the car. The city buzzed around us, oblivious to the empire we'd just toppled. I glanced at Ethan, his face calm, but his eyes alight with something fierce, triumphant. "You didn't have to do that," I said softly, my voice barely steady. He stopped, turning to me. "Mom, I didn't do it just for you. I did it because of everything you are every late night, every sacrifice, every time you chose me over yourself." My throat tightened, words failing me. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as the janitor mom, but as the woman who'd built a man. By evening, the news broke like wildfire. Headlines screamed across screens. From Forbes to TechCrunch, Stanford grad ousts, real estate tycoon in hostile takeover. Social media exploded, posts dissecting the fall of Harper Realty, the company that once glittered in San Francisco's skyline. Charles Harper's smug face, now pale and defeated, flashed on news sites, his legacy crumbling under Ethan's calculated strike. Evelyn's socialite brunches vanished from Instagram, her curated life replaced by whispers of scandal. Sophia, once a fixture on every influencer's feed, went dark, her accounts silent, her champagne-soaked selfies gone. Rumors swirled of lawsuits, fraud, backdoor deals, the Harpers' dirty secrets spilling out for the world to see. They weren't just humiliated. They were broken. A week later, a knock came at our Palo Alto apartment. I opened the door to find Sophia, her designer coat damp from the rain, her eyes red, her confidence shattered. "Ethan," she said, her voice cracking, "I messed up. My family. They pushed me to act like them. I didn't mean it." Ethan stood behind me, his face stone cold. "You mean you didn't mean it until you lost," he said, his voice low, cutting. "You stood there, Sophia, while they called my mom a prop. You chose their laughter over her dignity." I raised a hand, my voice quiet but firm. "Sophia, you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it backfired." She froze, her lips trembling. Ethan pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Your family signed this when they were desperate to offload shares. It bars any Harper from ever working at or owning a piece of Harper Realty again. That includes you." He handed it to her, his eyes unyielding. "We're done." Sophia's tears fell. But Ethan closed the door, soft but final, the click echoing in the quiet room. Days later. I walked through Stanford's halls, no longer just the janitor. Colleagues who'd once ignored me stopped to shake my hand, inviting me to a faculty event to honor Ethan's achievements. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. The Harpers' world had collapsed, their name now a cautionary tale. But Ethan and we were just beginning. As I looked at my son, standing tall, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving that a janitor's heart could outshine a tycoon's gold. And the world was finally listening. The Palo Alto sky glowed with the soft hues of a late afternoon, casting warmth over our small apartment balcony. Ethan leaned against the railing, his eyes tracing the horizon, a quiet pride in his posture. I sat beside him, a cup of coffee cooling in my hands, still processing the whirlwind of the past weeks. The fall of Harper Realty was no longer just news. It was a story etched into San Francisco's memory, a tale of a janitor's son who turned the tables on an empire. But for me, Grace Thompson, it wasn't about their ruin. It was about what Ethan built from it, what he chose to do with the power he'd claimed. My boy, once a kid with patched jeans studying by candlelight, was now a man rewriting our story. A year passed, and the world had changed. Ethan didn't just dismantle the Harpers' legacy, he created one of his own. He founded the Thompson Foundation, a scholarship program for kids of working-class families, janitors, drivers, cooks, dreaming of careers in tech and science. The launch was held at Stanford, in the same auditorium where I'd been mocked. This time, I sat in the front row, my dress simple, but my heart full. Ethan took the stage, his voice steady, resonant. "My mother, Grace Thompson, taught me that success isn't about money or titles," he said, his eyes finding mine. "It's about courage, about standing up for what's right, about building something that lasts." The crowd erupted, applause thundering through the hall. I blinked back tears, not of shame this time, but of pride. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. He went on, his words carrying weight. "The Thompson Foundation will lift up those who've been overlooked, just like my mom was, because real strength doesn't come from a bank account, it comes from heart, from grit, from love." The mayor shook his hand, reporters snapped photos, and students in the audience stood, clapping, their faces alight with hope. I thought of the nights I'd scrubbed floors, my hands raw, my dreams tucked away so Ethan could have his. Every ache, every long shift, had led to this moment. He'd taken the Harpers' cruelty and turned it into a beacon for others. That was my son. The lessons from this weren't just for us, they were for anyone listening. First, stand tall against judgment. The world will try to define you by your job, your clothes, your past, but you decide your worth. I learned that, standing in that auditorium, no longer hiding. Second, honor those who lift you up. Ethan never forgot the sacrifices I made. and that loyalty became his strength. Third, use your power to do good. Ethan could have walked away with his millions, but he chose to give back, to open doors for kids like him. Those choices, those truths, are what make a legacy. As the ceremony ended, Ethan walked over, pulling me into a hug. "This is for you, Mom," he whispered, "because you believed in me when no one else did." My eyes misted, but I smiled, feeling richer than any tycoon. The Harpers' laughter had faded, but our story, our heart, was just beginning to echo. And in that moment, I knew we'd built something no one could ever tear down. The applause from the Thompson Foundation launch still echoed in my ears as I stood on our Palo Alto balcony, the city lights twinkling below. Ethan joined me, his face softer now, the fire in his eyes replaced by a quiet strength. We'd turned the Harpers' mockery into a movement, a legacy that lifted up kids who'd been told they weren't enough. My heart swelled, not just for what we'd done, but for what it meant. The world had seen us not as the janitor mom or the kid from the wrong side of town, but as a mother and son who'd fought back with grit and heart. And now, it's your turn to carry that fire. Was Ethan's stand against the Harpers justified? Would you have walked out of that auditorium, hand in hand with the person who gave you everything, to face down those who laughed? Think about it. Who in your life has been overlooked, underestimated, pushed aside by those too blind to see their worth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share your story because every voice matters. Every fight counts. If this story hit you, if it made your heart race or your fists clench, hit that like button. Let's show the world that stories like ours aren't just tales, they're truth. Pass this video to someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a friend who's been judged, a parent who's sacrificed in silence, or a kid who's dreaming big despite the odds. Share it to remind them they're not alone, that their heart is stronger than any insult. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that cut through the noise tales of betrayal met with justice, of underdogs rising to rewrite the rules. Because out there, in a world quick to judge, the truth always finds its way. Never underestimate the heart of those who fight in silence. Stay bold. Stay true. Stay tuned.